Hey, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Good to have you here as always. So this week, more movies, yeah? So last week's video on my top 8 badass outlaw biker movies proved to be quite popular. So this week, I'm going to do my top 8 best and worst skinhead movies. Because I know a lot of you like all those kind of gritty, violent movies, and a lot of you love the skinhead movies. And I did too, I'm not going to lie. When I was in the skinhead gang, these movies were kind of, they were on the top 10 playlist. Not so much anymore. But today I thought I would share some of that list, yeah? So grab yourself a coffee or a popcorn or, grab your boots and let's get into it. Top 8 best and worst skinhead movies. All right, so coming in at number 8 is the biggest dog on the list. It's a movie called Parah. Now, this is an American-made movie from the late 90s, early 2000s. This was a jumping on the bandwagon kind of movie. Now, there are other notable skinhead movies made around this time, and Parah was just jumping on that bandwagon. They touted the movie as the most violent, shocking skinhead movie ever made, and it probably was, just for the simple fact that it was just senseless violence, and none of it was based in reality. So they could just do whatever they want with this movie. And they did. And there were some scenes when I just absolutely cringed massively at it. I cringed a lot of the acting to begin with, but I sat through that just to see if the movie would hold out. Unfortunately, it didn't. So if you're after a real bad B-grade skinhead movie to start your viewing off with, start with Parah or just give it a wide berth and head over to number 7 in our list. So following up on the boot heels of that one is number 7, The Believer. Oh, and if you can believe this movie, oh man, this movie is about a Jewish Nazi skinhead. Yeah. The movie stars a very young Ryan Gosling, which is interesting. It is actually a fairly well-made movie, but the whole premise of the movie, this young guy grows up Jewish, ends up hating his whole race and peoples and just hates the world and becomes a neo-Nazi skinhead and gets involved in the whole, National Socialist movement in America, and he becomes quite high up and yada, yada, yada. I won't ruin the movie for you in just case you want to go watch it. Essentially, the movie was a good story, but not really told too well. It wasn't a real attention-grabbing movie, that's for sure. And considering the story, you think it would be. But these movies are made, around that time, like I said, when these skinhead movies were coming out, but they didn't want to glorify that way of life in any way. So they would do stories that really demeaned the skinheads and their way of life. And this is one of those movies. So jumping in on the list like a boot party, at number 6 is a newer movie, the 2019 movie Skin. Now, Skin is a movie that's based on the life of Brian Widner. Brian Widner was one of the founders of the Vinlanders Social Club, which was one of the biggest skinhead movements in the United States in the late 90s, 2000s, and onwards. Vinlanders were pretty notorious, and this movie really shows you how notorious they were and why they got the reputation they did. The movie itself focuses on mostly towards the end of Brian's years with the Vinlanders. Now, they turned against him. A lot of shit went down he didn't want to be a part of, and so they turned against him. He in turn, out of fear for his life, gave evidence, and the movie is essentially about all that. It shows a really gritty side of that life, and it is an accurate depiction of that life at that time. Now, when all this was going down, I was at full patch with the Hammerskins. Now, Hammerskins and Vinlanders were enemies. In fact, the Vinlanders started because Brian didn't like how exclusive the Hammerskins were, so he started the Vinlanders Social Club. When I watched it, it really hit home for me. It was like, wow, okay, yeah, this is pretty darn accurate. It is a great movie, and it shows a lot of really crazy stuff, like Brian getting his facial tattoos lasered off. He had something like 130 hours of laser removal to get all his tattoos removed. That was absolutely nuts. But Brian is also now, he works with ex-gang members, ex-skinheads, and he helps people to understand about hate and these groups. So fantastic guy, fantastic movie. Highly recommend this one. That's why it's in at number 6. All right, so coming on the list at number 5 is another one of these cop infiltrates the bad group kind of movies.
He's an undercover cop doing a good job with a bad attitude.
Movie called Imperium. Now, Imperium is about an FBI agent who goes undercover with a far-right extremist Nazi skinhead group. Now, this movie was basically loosed on real events. Now, it is true that the FBI were heavily investigating white supremacist groups in the late 90s or throughout the 2000s, mostly due to the Oklahoma bombing, where it was discovered Timothy McVeigh was a white supremacist. So it was open season on all these groups. And they discovered that these groups were actually dealing with domestic terrorism. You know, they were getting full on. They were really planning on overthrowing the government, a lot of these groups. And this movie showcases that. When I first heard about the movie, I went, oh yeah, it's just another one of these, you know, cop infiltrates a group kind of movies. But then I actually watched it and I went, yeah, okay, it's really well done, it's well written, and it is actually well researched. And then, of course, Daniel Radcliffe playing the lead role of the Harry Potter as an FBI agent turned skinhead. But he absolutely crushes it. He played that role really well. I was very impressed. And that's why this movie's just a little bit higher on the list for me. So, great movie. Go check it out, Imperium. All right, so stomping onto the list at number 4, we've got the old British classic, Made in Britain. Yeah. Anyone who knows skinhead movies will know this film. It's an absolute classic movie. Starring very young Tim Roth. In fact, it was his first ever acting job, and he killed it in this movie. Plays a young guy thrown into a borstal, which is a correctional home for youth facility. Young skinhead, but massive chip on his shoulder, but he's fairly well educated. He knows what's up. So this movie just revolves around him and everything he gets into, and more importantly, the consequences of all his actions, which is what this movie is about. There are some absolutely incredible scenes in this film. There's some incredible acting and dialogue, and overall the movie is just really outstanding. This is a classic film for anyone to watch. Go check it out. Made in Britain. Excuse my poor British accent. Yeah. But moving on to the next one on the list. All right, so let's get into it. Number 3 on the list is American History X. Yeah, I know. Everyone probably thinks it should be higher on the list. Incredible film. Tells the story of 2 brothers who are growing up in America and all the hardships they go through and how they get involved with the Nazi skinhead movement over there. One of them goes to jail for this absolutely horrible crime, and he finds redemption within jail. Now, yes, fantastic movie, fantastic story, but they kind of missed the mark in a lot of ways. Now, being an American movie is Hollywood, and a lot of the depictions of the skinhead movement, their way of life, and how they do things was really inaccurate. It was really over the top. So yeah, the movie for me has always kind of missed that mark, and I've always just seen it as a massive Hollywood production, you know, which has come on the coattails of a couple other skinhead movies before it, which actually more accurately depicted that way of life. All right, so getting into it at number 2, here's a bit of a shocker for you. Romper Stomper, yeah, the classic Australian skinhead movie. Now, this is the one that has inspired many of the movies on this list, including Parah and even American History X. It was partly inspired by Romper Stomper. And Romper Stomper was an accurate depiction of what Australian skinheads were like in that time. And they did their research. They actually spent time with well-known figures from the Australian skinhead movement at that time. They followed them around. They lived and ate with them, and they, you know, really did their research. And then, of course, you have Russell Crowe, very young Russell Crowe, one of his first ever movies, played an incredible role in that. He was a standout in that movie, as were many of the actors. You know, it was a very gritty movie, and those actors made it so. Now, I've watched Romper Stomper so many times, and I'm sure many of you have. Majority of the guys in the skinhead movement that I was with all watched this movie, and we could quote this movie. And of course, the soundtrack was played all the time. And of course, it has become a bit of a cult classic. Whether you're into the whole skinhead movement or whatever, it doesn't really matter. It is a cult classic movie. Not really a feel-good at-home family movie, but one well worth watching. So check it out. All right, so what's number one then? It's got to be a pretty epic one to be number one. Well, for me, my number one pick for skinhead movies is This Is England. Yes. This is an incredible film, and it is very, very accurate as to what that way of life was like. Now, This Is England centers around a young fella in the early 80s, befriends a group of skinheads. They all become great mates, and then one of their friends gets out of jail, and he introduces them into the National Front. You know, and this is a great depiction of what actually happened to the skinhead movement and how it grew into racism through involvement with groups like National Front and then with Blood and Honor and all that kind of stuff. Now, This Is England is just an incredible portrayal. The actors' performances are fantastic. The music in the movie is just absolutely great. And they actually spawned a whole series of movies, This Is England, going all throughout the 80s. Up and I think until the early 90s, and it focuses around all the same characters from the movie, and it actually has all the same actors. So well worth checking out also if you want to watch this movie, or if you want to see about skinhead culture and life in England in the early 80s and what it was like, go check out This Is England. So yeah, number one pick. I know not everyone's going to agree. Of course, there are all the hardcore out there like Romper Stomper, American History X, blah, blah, blah. But we all have different reasons for watching these movies. You know, I watch them now just kind of to reminisce and now to educate people as to what this life is like and to give you some suggestions of ones that are a little bit more accurate than others and which ones to avoid, like that dog Parah. Just leave that one alone. Trust me, you'll thank me for it. So there you go. There's another top 8 list. And hey, thank you so much for tuning in and sharing them and, you know, talking about them and giving me your suggestions. I am going to be doing more movie lists and more top 8 lists in the future. So give me suggestions. If there are suggestions for any top 8 kind of lists you want me to do, put them in the comments below and I'll definitely give it a blast. Thank you so much for being here as always. I really appreciate you tuning in, but I will see you next week for another great video. And hey, as always, you know the drill. Give us a big like, subscribe down below and hit that little bell to get notified. And I'll be seeing you on the channel next week. Peace out, everyone. Love and light to you all.